Yep. And we have, I believe y'all are all reference services librarians, but I'm actually not 100% sure. But we have Barbara Peterson, Stephen Michaels, Teresa Nesbitt, William Brogdon from University of North Georgia. And I think also y'all are all at different campuses, which is why you are talking about promoting library resources at regional campuses. But if y'all are ready, you can take it away.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yep, sure can.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So welcome to our presentation about promoting library resources at regional campuses. We are from the University of North Georgia Libraries, and that includes 5 campuses with 3 smaller extended campuses. Of the 5, there are 3 that are the smaller extended regional campuses. This presentation is all about how we promote library resources and services to the student populations at regional campuses. Essentially, it's a specific slate of services to a unique population of students. We equate our promotional activities with the concept of sign spinning, and hence the title, and we'll get to that again in a minute. Our presenters are, by campus, Teresa Nesbitt and William Brogdon from the Cumming campus of UNG, and Stephen Michaels from the Oconee campus, and I'm Barbara Peterson from the Blue Ridge campus. So consider librarians as sign spinners. We think the metaphor fits based on the type of work that we do and our experience working on regional campuses. Sign spinners are sign holders you see on the street that spin or dance or wear costumes with a sign, and their job is to attract attention. They're human directionals, says Google. Sign spinning is for us made up of promoting and developing tactics to connect users to library resources and lending systems. And this includes things like the Galileo databases and things like Gill Express. So we're going to look at promotional opportunities through our library instruction program and digital marketing. We want to give special attention to the unique factors that make database promotion and instruction in using databases more challenging on regional campuses with small collections. And we also want to consider changes in promotion strategy brought about by the pandemic. So in essence, we want to share some of our challenges in sign spinning. And at the end, we want to hear what your ideas are for promoting library resources. So to get started, we will go to William, who's going to give us an overview of the regional campuses by the numbers.
So just to give you a sense of what we do, who we are at the regional campuses, here's a map of all the UNG campuses. This was created from a consolidation of North Georgia College and State University with Georgia State. So there's the 2 main campuses in Dahlonega and Gainesville. And then there's the 3 regional campuses, which makes us feel unique, you know, like we're out there. Students sometimes don't know that there's a library on campus. Since we're not housed in our own library buildings, we're in the same building that everyone else is in. And students often come to the wrong conclusion. No books, no library resources, no access, no librarians, which is a perception that we, as the reference services librarians, try to combat with our sign spinning and outreach. And drilling down a little bit more, here are the breakdown by numbers. You can see Blue Ridge has the fewest amount of students, Oconee with the most, coming in the Goldilocks zone in the middle, which Teresa and I will talk to just about everything. These are all commuter students on campus, usually in their first 2 years of college. All of us are very much feeder campuses for the larger campuses. And so we see students for 2 years, usually at the most, sometimes less if they do more coursework and leave sooner. We have a lot of students just starting out, a lot of students transferring, and this collection of students, a 5th to a 4th on campus are dual enrollment. And most of those students are familiar with Galileo from high school, and part of our promotion is showing them that their Galileo high school access is different now that they're in college. So each campus has a library presence. There are 2 librarians incoming, 2 in Oconee, and Barbara is the only one on the Blue Ridge campus, and even then only a few days a week. We all have reference services on each campus, but things like technical services and access services are more centralized at the main campuses. And yeah, that is a good overview.
On the Oconee campus, we're pretty well positioned as being like a recognizable library with a dedicated space within the Student Resource Center building, which houses the tutoring and writing center services and kind of a catch-all of their classrooms and different types of spaces in that building. But the building's called Student Resource Center. We feel like we fit in the name of the building. But because of the, commuter campus syndrome that we're going to talk about a little bit later, a lot of students just kind of come just for their classes and then leave. If they hang out anywhere, they might hang out in their car in the parking lot. See a lot of that. So it's not a given that just because a student takes classes on the Oconee campus that they'll know that there's a library there. But we do have, computer lab space. We've got some ranges in the stacks that when people walk in, it actually feels like a library. So we're very happy about that. And what makes Oconee, one of the things that makes us a little unique is how our proximity to UGA main campus. We're just about 9 miles away from the main campus in downtown Athens. So it's not uncommon to see a lot of UGA hats and t-shirts and bumper stickers on the UNG campus in Oconee. Most of the classes that library instruction is invited to participate in are English, psychology, biology, sociology, and communications classes.
Barbara.
Thank you. Blue Ridge opened on us in a storefront in 2015 and resided there until about 2020 when it got its own new building. And they actually moved in 2021. The original Blue Ridge campus did not have a library presence at all. All of the services to that facility were done on demand. So if someone needed to come out and do an instruction session, then that was arranged most often at Cumming, I believe. Sometimes at Dahlonega, but most often at Cumming. And essentially everything was sort of done as it was needed. There was nothing that was really there on campus as a presence of any type. But in 2021, they were able to move into their new building, and in the building, they had planned for library services and space, but in the final vision and picture of it, that did not materialize. Instead, we have a small circulating and reference collection that's in the atrium area, which is the central area you see on this picture, which is a beautiful, very light, bright space. And it's largely where the students gather and do what they're going to do on campus, those that stay on campus. We did experience some logistical issues at Blue Ridge between 2019 or so and 2020 that really involved getting Gill Express and intercampus loans to campus and get them managed correctly. So we had to sort of do some digging and find out what the issue was, and decided that it was because we really needed some person to oversee what was going on. And a lot of that was handled when we, when actually I picked up just monitoring the things that were sent in transit or through Alma were in transit to Blue Ridge. So managing that, looking at that as many times as I do during the week helps me, you know, find things and retrieve things if they go astray. Right now, presently, I am on campus 2 days a week in the fall and the spring semesters. And in the summer, I'm there 1 day a week. Essentially what I do there is the instruction, any instruction requests, research consultations. I do promotional activities when possible. And I maintain open office hours during any time that I'm there. I'm just going to have an open office, so someone can drop in at any time. It's not, I used to have them scheduled, but then I went to the full day of open office.
So as William mentioned earlier, the Cumming campus is kind of the middle child of the regional campuses. We are in a single building on the Cumming campus, like Blue Ridge. But unlike in Blue Ridge, we actually have our own room within that building that is dedicated library space. And like Oconee, we do have a collection, but as you can see in this beautiful diagram that William made, the books are not immediately apparent when you enter the room. So this is the view from the main front door. You mostly see the computers. Students often think that we're a computer lab or just a place for them to sit, work together and eat lunch. And you don't really see our 160 items of leisure and reference books until you walk further into the space. So they're really, I feel like for students looking at the space, the library aspect is kind of an afterthought. And that really plays into the need for us as the reference librarians to play up the fact that we are a library. And students, because we only have reference and leisure books on campus, our students are extra reliant on Gill Express and our online resources to help support their scholarship for their classwork.
And here's that breakdown of Gill Express, comparing all the campuses. You can see that our regional campuses do have a modest use of Gill Express, but seeing the collection just from that picture, the students are heavily reliant on Gill Express and on ebooks to fill that knowledge gap. And like in 2021, Cumming had a bigger bump. Could have been because a professor was here one semester and taught a class. Could have been they were trying to finish up some research that they didn't do in 2020. Not really sure, but things are always changing at these regional campuses by the nature of where we are and how people come through us, so to speak. So lastly, this questions section is for you to ask any questions either in the chat or just speak up about our environment. So yeah, what questions do you have about who we are? You can put it in the chat.
We can loop back to it too if we see them closer to the end. But that leads us into
How many students are served at each campus?
Oh no, okay.
Blue Ridge has 225 plus, Cumming at 1,500, and Blue Ridge is over at 2,600.
So fairly petite.
Yes.
At all the campuses. I don't want to jump the gun again. Any other questions? As a school that also has 2 larger campuses with 3 regional or satellite campuses, we see similar patterns of usage. Yeah. So that is, oh, and then we have Amy, one more question. You mentioned Gill Express, but is ILL used at satellite campuses as well? And yes, they are. So we also have access to interlibrary loan, but those are processed through, I think, the Dahlonega campus before they come to us. So, Anne, I'm glad that you mentioned this being a fairly typical pattern that you also see at Middle Georgia, with the regional campuses kind of being more heavily dependent on like Gill Express and online resources, but also maybe having less awareness of them. And that's the experience that I've had too in my experience in the past 10 years working at different regional campuses at different colleges. So I think that just anecdotally, I have noticed that like when I am in class with students, with teaching them about these different resources, sometimes it's the first time that they're even hearing about them. They're completely unaware that we have the ability to request books to be sent to this campus, and they think that it's just off the table for them entirely. So I think that's kind of what makes us unique from a more traditional campus with a bigger library presence, where they can kind of skip to this last promotional step here. They can go straight to how to access and how to use services and resources. Whereas at a regional campus library, we have to focus on bullets 1 and 2 before we can even get to bullet 3 of emphasizing that we are a library, that the campus has a library, period, that this is the location that students can go to get access to the same resources that you would have available at a traditional campus. And then after we do all of that legwork, then we can start talking about how to access them. So for the rest of our presentation today, we are going to be focusing on different ways that the 4 of us at our different regional campuses have tried to get the word out about Gill Express and about Galileo databases in particular. And we use a variety of strategies. So we'll be looking at the more tried and true traditional strategies like signage in the library, online promotion, workshops, and then we'll also be talking about instruction and how we use instruction as a tool to also try to get students aware of these resources and acclimated to using them. All right, so starting out with signage. We have, usually at the point of need, we'll put up materials letting students know that if they don't see the types of resources they need on the shelves on our campuses, there's still a way for them to request books to have them sent to them. So the signage can range from the kind of eye-grabbing and catchy, just to, it's like this sign here is very short and to the point. It doesn't go into too much detail. It's just saying you can get more books. Whereas signage at a Coney is much more detailed, and it is a how-to of how to use these services, how to get books through Gill Express and Intercampus Loan. And these are generally, we try to use Canva to create most of these signs, so it doesn't require like a huge design knowledge or background. Just kind of take a template and slap our content in there. One thing that we might want to focus on in the future is maybe getting more consistency across our regional campuses and what our signage looks like. But for now, we do find that students tend to go sign blind very quickly, and I'll have students just walk straight past the signs and come up to me and ask how, like, if they can get other books. So the effectiveness of our signage is also questionable. We also, this is not limited to regional campus students, but we also use our social media as a promotional tool, specifically to really emphasize our Galileo resources and databases. We have a monthly feature that all of the reference services librarians contribute to. So each month, a different librarian will pick a database in Galileo that they think maybe does not get enough traffic or love, or has a great filter tools that like they think that students could benefit from, and they will write a blurb and we will share it every month on our social media pages on Facebook and Instagram. We also try to take advantage of any sort of local UNG news or goings on to piggyback off of those stories and interject a little bit of promotion for our databases. So in this example, we had article in the Chronicle of Higher Education that highlighted UNG as one of the top producers of Fulbright scholars. So we just threw together a quick post saying, hey, if you want to read this article, the libraries have Chronicle for Higher Education, so you can access it through us. So we're also looking for opportunities to promote more organically. I also wanted to mention how the pandemic turned really all of our students into this regional category almost by forcing us to go remote. And so that we really ramped up our database promotion during the pandemic, and we changed our monthly database spotlight to a weekly database spotlight. For example, we had this one on our jazz music library. We're really focusing on kind of self-care also at this time. We used the librarians to also try to promote some of our remote services as well. So we had a librarian recommendation series where librarians would recommend videos from Films on Demand or ebooks that they had read that students could access from home. And that was also a good way to try to keep students connected to their librarians while we were apart. And lastly, we use social media to promote any changes to database access during the pandemic. So when ProQuest changed all of their ebook access to unlimited, we were plugging that as well. And I think because everyone was trapped at home in front of the computer all day, we had much better engagement for these posts than we did for our more typical monthly routine posts. Lastly, we also have a scroll bar on the library website itself, just to provide a highlight reel of the remote services that students have access to through the libraries, so including ebooks and databases. So workshops. For those of you who are on regional or commuter campuses, I think this will probably ring pretty true to you, where workshops can be extremely hit or miss. It's so difficult to try to schedule a time where students are willing to come to the library for an hour-long workshop when their typical schedule might just involve them coming to campus, going to class, and then immediately going home, especially for our dual enroll students who might be coming on a bus. So while we have used workshops as a method to promote Gill Express and Galileo databases, I would say that our success has been mixed on this front as well. So I have a couple stills here from a presentation that we did back in 2017 when we were first introducing our students to the Gill interface. And we also included instruction on how to use Gill Express. But if I'm remembering correctly, if I cast my mind all the way back to 2017, I think that we had like 2 attendees total for those workshops. So it's a little disheartening. We tend to have more success. So this is a flyer for a workshop at Oconee where they were emphasizing primary sources that were accessible to students on Galileo. And they had a professor encourage the students to attend this workshop series. And so attendance was much higher. The faculty buy-in is so important to making a workshop work. And Stephen, I think you had a note that you wanted to add here too, is that right?
Oh, just that we had a similar strategy with APA and Galileo drop-in workshops. So we partnered with people in the tutoring center who provided APA citation assistance, and then a librarian or two would be there to handle Galileo questions. And it was a really nice pairing, not only because it was also, we had the professor offer a little bit of extra credit for students that showed up. But students would come in thinking that they only had a couple of APA questions, and then they realize, then I approach them and say, did you find everything you need? What kind of, can I take a look at your works cited and see your sources? And then they find out that they need also some research help as well, and vice versa. So that was, those have worked out well, and those are the most consistent workshops that we kind of hold on this campus.
Okay, we thought we would kind of cover in trying to consider our ways of promoting databases through instruction. We would kind of discuss first some of the distinct things about each of our campuses as it relates to instruction. So with that, I'm going to throw it back to Stephen.
As I mentioned earlier, we're right down the road from UGA main campus and UGA libraries. So we do spend a little extra time promoting the fact that UNG students can, they have the option, they can request something through Gill Find and have it delivered, but it's going to take a few days, or they can just drive down the road and check out circulating materials from the UGA libraries with their UNG card. So another thing I think a lot of people will be able to relate to, no matter what kind of campus or institution you're at, is a lot of students will wait till the last minute. So they don't have 2, 3, 4 working days to wait for a book to show up. So that I see a lot of that seems to be something that we could promote a lot more, because a lot of students and sometimes faculty seem very surprised and happy when they find out that they can use their UNG card at UGA or any participating USG institution. Another kind of unique thing at Oconee is that we do have a professor too who will have particular assignments where they have to find an actual print book. So they actually have to walk themselves into the library and find a print book. And if we don't have it here, that service through Gill to either go to UGA or wait for a book from another campus is very important for particular assignments. And another assignment that another professor has is a scavenger hunt. So they'll have to find, you know, a book on a certain topic on the shelf and take a picture of it. So it's nice that some professors are having these required assignments for students that involve them physically going into the library. And then we get a chance to show them, you know, they might not have otherwise gone to the catalog, but we'll see them wander up to the catalog kiosk computer and look kind of lost. And then we get to run out from behind the desk and show them how that works and show them all kinds of options that hopefully they will use again in the future.
At Blue Ridge, I think some of our unique instruction features are that are sort of tied to what I do in class. And one of the things that I do pretty routinely in just about any class that I teach is really emphasize the electronic book collection. We have been, it's almost 10 years now that we've really been purchasing and emphasizing the purchase of electronic books, and our collections must be, I haven't gotten a number on this, I shouldn't say, but I'm fairly sure it's in the hundreds of thousands of books that are electronic. If you do a search in our catalog on just about any topic, the majority of the books that come back will be in electronic format. So for me, I'm sensitive to the fact that the Blue Ridge campus really doesn't have much of a book collection to draw from, but the students should be aware of this very strong electronic book collection that exists. So we spend time looking at how the platform works. There are several different platforms, so we kind of look at a couple of them. Some of the special features to how the book is presented, some of the nifty things that they can do with it. So at least they are aware they do always have access to a collection of electronic books. I also usually incorporate in instruction some type of discussion of searching and some type of looking at syntax for searches so that they improve whatever process they're using. Most of the time, it's just throw the words in the box. I would really like to see them use some of the search syntax that's common to the databases. So we talk about that and we look at how the results can change when you change your search. Usually that's a component of just about any class I talk to. I also really try to give them the sense that they're not there, stuck out there by themselves without any support from the library. And we really talk up the research consultations, which can be done in person, but also virtually. And the chat reference that's available to them, I think it's roughly 50 hours a week that they have someone who's available online to help them use the collection or the service or whatever. So those are some of the things that I kind of emphasize in the instruction. And with that, I'm going to turn it to Cumming, I guess, William.
Yes, so like I said before, and you saw on the map, Cumming is between Dahlonega and Gainesville. And as such, we have a lot of faculty turnover. Either they start here and then move to one of the larger campuses, or they're already at one of the larger campuses. And there's no, the department doesn't have permanent offices here, so they'll still send one of their professors down for a semester, and we'll get an influx of new professors that we have to do outreach to, say, hey, the library is here. You know the library on your campus? Yeah, well, we're here too. It's the same library. We have all the same stuff. Have us come to class. Sometimes the assignments are different. Maybe accounts for a bump in books that are used or sent to campus. But there's that constant outreach and constant turn new professors, some new faces. Seems to go in the same cycle that the students are coming through. Our dual enrollment students, we don't know who they are, but we know that as dual enrollment, And now after the pandemic, people not wanting to be here, we try to, I guess, capture them wherever we can. If we see them in the hall, we say hi. If we've seen them in class, they're more likely to stop and ask us questions when they're doing homework, either out in the hallway or in the library. As long as we're friendly and approachable, they're more likely to recognize that we have value. And we're usually the first point of contact when they have other academic issues or need to know something about financial aid. We're the people they see first, and we can take them elsewhere. The last thing that you saw with the coming campus is while we have a dedicated library space, we don't have a dedicated instruction space. We go to the classrooms where the professors are, and there are only 2 other classrooms on campus where there are computer labs. And initially, the librarians did not want to do research clinics, but now with everyone having a cell phone and a computer, one or the other, that will work to search and actually do research effectively, we've started holding research clinics where we've either given them material beforehand or do a 10 to 15 minute run through of a particular database attached to an assignment, show them how to use it, give them another 5 or 10 minutes to use it. And then one or both of the librarians in conjunction with the teacher will walk around and see how they're faring with their search through these databases. They need technical help, we'll happy to help them with that. If they're struggling with searching, we'll show them some good ways to search for whatever their particular topic for that particular assignment is. So now I'll turn it back to Barbara.
Okay, so having looked at some of the distinctions between the regional campuses, we want to talk about, excuse me, some of the similarities, things that we think are pretty universal to how we approach instruction as a way to promote databases on our campuses. So these are some of the things we think are universal. Essentially, teaching databases both to upper level and lower level students, as well as undergrads and grads, is the kind of thing we're accustomed to. And we're also accustomed to the idea that those things change frequently, meaning that we have to change gears frequently to adjust from one level of student to another, or from an undergrad to a grad student. And that definitely is going to change things like our pedagogy and our how complex a topic we're going to try to address, the types of exercises that we're going to use, the kinds of in-class activities we're going to use, and how much time we spend on the different events of instruction. This can be very straightforward, like instead of for an undergraduate class, instead of trying to look at individual resources, we use the Discover search. But for graduate classes, we are looking at individual databases. We want them to know about APA. We want them to know about the APA databases, PsycInfo, and psych articles. And it's a matter of making that adjustment and making it quickly. Another thing that I try to distinguish when talking to different students at different levels is to think about what kind of features in the databases that I think some should know versus others don't care about. So for the undergraduate students, they are interested probably in doing a better job with their searching, so we spend time with that. Whereas the grad students probably are going to be looking at some point for things like data sets. So finding that is important to them when looking at things like the psychology databases. Another thing that's pretty universal is this commuter campus syndrome that everybody's mentioned at least once. When the student is on campus to go to class only, and then they are off campus, they are gone. This really impacts how we can do things like workshops, as Teresa has mentioned, in clinics, and how we can do promotional activities, of course, because we have to be cognizant of the things we're asking the students to do that's not class time. These are folks with jobs and families. Some of them are dual enrolled and have to be somewhere else. So that's an issue that you really have to find another hook to get somebody to a promotional event or to something that you're doing outside of the classroom, or consider how you can deliver it in another way, like through an online presence or a module or something like that. Also, the concept of being able to catch, one of you guys have mentioned this before, catching students in the stacks. That's a Coney thing, I think. I have to catch students in the atrium. So you guys catching students in the stacks and seeing what kind of project or paper they're working on, and kind of redirecting them if necessary. It sort of requires a sensitivity to the things that they are doing in class, the assignments that they have coming down the pike. This is kind of an extension of the roving reference concept. And it's, I don't know, I don't want to say it's invasive, but I think it's something that you have to be careful with. But I think it's necessary, you know, paying attention to what the students are working on, and being present there when they are trying to do research to help them along. Another thing that's pretty universal is our promotion of databases through research consultation. I think anybody that does research consultations knows this is not a time to talk about databases as an overview. It's really a time to talk about specific sources. And sometimes you can really catch when you have found a resource that's going to exactly answer an assignment. It's very, very important. And then being able to, you know, get a hook into the network that the student uses. Hey, I found this, and the librarian helped me find this. This is a really great resource for this particular assignment. If you can get into that level, you can usually use that to get a lot of traction for a lot of databases. And since we've mentioned using research consultations for specific assignments, we kind of thought of all of the examples we had of that. There are lots of them. Just from the discussions we've had, there are a number of different classes, like our Education 2110 class. That is, this is essentially about critical issues in education, and it's the last class that students who are in the teaching program are taking. It's one of their last classes before they actually go out in the field and work as in-service teachers. They're supervised and all, but this is their before they go into the schools and work. And this is one of the assignments that we think well matches the CQ researcher setup for giving background information for their topics. Most education issues, or I shouldn't say most, I should say a number of education issues are well covered in CQ researcher, and you do not want to send a student who has to do a paper at this level out into the databases to find journal articles before they have some kind of background. And CQ researcher is very good for that. It's also a great resource for a lot of 1101, 1102 classes. I could give you a number of different assignments they have that it's a perfect match for. Another 1101 and 1102 assignment that we think we have some perfect matches and databases for are the argumentative speeches and essays. The 1101s and 1102s that do that mostly can use the Gill in context sources and the opposing viewpoint sources. And I know a lot of people don't like Gill that much, but I have found them much more useful since they did a revamp. And in their results list, they are really highlighting the things that are different types of sources. So you have academic journals, and you have reference sources, and you have primary sources. So being able to point this to students directly kind of makes this a one-stop shop for students. They don't have to necessarily go into the databases for journals, for peer-reviewed journals. They can use also something like the Gill product. And lastly, I wanted to mention finding primary resources, which we find most of our history classes are going to be working towards for some assignment or another. There are a number that do a better job, I think, of getting students to the primary resource that can be most useful. And those are the ones that most of the time are produced by the vendors. There are a number of digital collections out there that don't search very well, and students can get easily lost in. They don't have good indexing. They don't have descriptive information. So I usually try to direct students to things like the Chronicling America collection, or one of the ProQuest history historical newspapers, or possibly Georgia Historic newspapers. Something that has a little better in the descriptive and indexing features that make it easier for the student to actually find things that they can use. And lastly, in this list, I wanted to talk a little about distinguishing Galileo database resources from open web content. And essentially, this is helping students to know the difference between what they are finding in the Galileo collections versus what they are finding on the open web. So the concept of proprietary resources is very important to try to drive home to students who are using essentially online collections, so that they know that they are gaining authority and quality resources that are put together and have gone through some type of editorial control. Then they don't have to be the evaluator of that resource when they get them from these kinds of databases. I'm going to let Stephen pick up with this because he has a really good slide on Galileo in context that's great to explain this topic.
Yeah, so this is based on a few handouts and just like infographics and things that I've printed out and brought to class with me, or had given to a professor to embed in D2L. And I'm really interested in what you all think about spending time actually kind of explaining how the sausage is made, or whatever the saying is, to students. Because I mean, still a lot of our instruction is one shot. I don't always do this, but I do try to, define terms and put things in context. The little bubble in the middle there is an infographic that I've put on some slides and I've mentioned in class a couple times, but just trying to come to a common definition of what Galileo is, which can be really confusing. A lot of students think Galileo is a database that everything lives in. And that's, not incorrect, but it's not really all there is. So sometimes I'll go over just kind of the nested nature of, your end goal is oftentimes finding an article which is published in a journal. What does a journal mean anymore? A lot of students have trouble with that. The database is provided by a vendor. EBSCO is not the database, that's the vendor, things like that. And Galileo provides access to these. So I do spend time sometimes even in a one shot with this. But what I spend more time with is that differentiating our subscription content that is gone through editorial process, like Barbara was saying, from Google. So I have a little handout where I just compare, okay, this is basically what Galileo can do for you in a sentence or two. These are the pros, these are the cons. Here's Google. It provides all sorts of stuff, but there are certainly cons and there are certainly pros. Google, I acknowledge a lot in instruction that Google is easy and familiar. And I'm there to help familiarize them with Galileo content. And then Gill find, because Gill, Galileo, EBSCO, JSTOR, Discover, all these terms can very quickly overload a student. So I do try to spend some time just defining things. And that could take time away from me teaching them or pointing them to individual databases provided by Galileo or the university that's housed in Galileo. So I use a handout in the lower left that breaks it down by type of information need, background, analysis, opinion, statistics, scholarly peer-reviewed research, which they might have heard something about in class. And then actually, I adjust this handout for each class based on the assignment. That's where I kind of point to a particular database. I'm like, you might want to check out these particular ones. And I do go over in class the whole navigation process from the library homepage to get to, JSTOR, say. So, but I'm really curious in the chat or at the end when we have some discussion time, hopefully, what you think about actually taking some time to give some of the background and context, if it's worth it. I'm not really sure sometimes. So think about that and let me know what you think. And next, Teresa's going to talk about some of the places where some of our instruction lives and how we convey some of this information.
Yeah, Stephen, I think it is. I don't know. I feel like knowing how Galileo is organized is so important for students to know how to navigate it. But that's, I don't know, balancing the time you spend on it is tricky. But so Stephen's learning objects really did a great job of conveying to students when to use Galileo, why they should use Galileo and library resources, and what they are. So the digital learning objects that I'm going to talk about now are more focused on how to access these databases. And there's some, disagreement here too of how much we should handhold students. So should we be teaching them how to navigate through the library to access these databases themselves, or should we just hand them a guide that will provide direct links to the databases that they need for a specific assignment? I feel that for certain assignments, when students are, the learning goal is more to teach students how to use a database, then it's perfectly fine to create these guides. Usually they will live in the student's learning management system in D2L, but we use these other platforms too, LibGuides, Google Sites, and Satori, and all three of these can be embedded into D2L where students can access them.
And so with LibGuides, the students can actually get there through our library homepage, which if they don't have a LibGuide embedded in their D2L class, we can still show them how to get to a LibGuide that will help them in their classes. Our LibGuides are very broad guides. Here we have the local Georgia newspapers. We'll show students this when they need those primary sources from those newspapers, but we don't make LibGuides for individual classes. That would be too much work for all the librarians. If we got asked about it a lot, no. But it's nice to have this. If a professor's like, hey, I just want to have something where they can link to all the newspapers, we're like, well, there's this LibGuide, import that into your D2L, embed that in there, and they can see that along with their assignments. Now for individual classes, we use something like Google Slides. And this is pretty much it. It's a digital handout, and Google Slides makes it look spiffy. I could knock something out like this pretty quickly instead of having a handout in class, or, with a Zoom class when I can't give them a handout that they just leave on the desk anyways. This can be their assignment tab. There's a link to 1 or 2 databases in a video, me showing them how to use it. I'll often use this as a starting point for those research clinics. This doesn't take them very long to get through. It's the size of a handout, but it uses links so that they can actually get to that one database that I'm explaining in the video. And hopefully, if the professor has assigned the content correctly, they'll have watched it before I get to their class to do the research clinic with them.
And just to wrap up our last 2 slides before we get to the questions, Satori is another platform that we use too, but I think anyone who's ever used any kind of freemium platform will maybe echo my frustration with Satori, where you can get just enough free tools to create a pretty nice looking resource page. But then if you want to insert a video, they're like, you need to get free premium, blah, blah, blah. So I only use Satori for if I really need to throw something together very quickly with just image, links, and text. And it works well for assignments like this English 1101 one, where students were just distinguishing between subjective, objective, and analytical sources. And I could just throw together some quick links and text explaining what all these different types of sources entailed, and linking to some Galileo resources they could use for examples too. And that takes us to our discussion.
Yeah, here are some questions that we picked out. First, I want to address a question that came in the chat a little while ago. Have you done outreach to the media specialist at the dual enrollment high schools? If yes, what does that look like? And I have not, and that had not even occurred to me. Has anybody else done outreach at the high schools? That's a great idea.
I have not. It's a great idea. I know they have connections to the local school in Blue Ridge.
So first, are there any particular Galileo resources or services that you think really could use some extra attention? And please feel free to put it in the chat or unmute. You should be able to unmute and speak. We'll give a few seconds for each one and feel free to address a previous question. I did mention earlier, you know, I try to focus on Oconee to talk about being able, the UNG students can physically go to other campuses and check out materials, and they do seem surprised at that. So that's something I try to put a little extra effort into. Next question is, how do you market, promote, and teach Galileo and Gill resources and services? You know, a lot of the stuff we've done is not necessarily new, groundbreaking, but we're really interested, and really what we were hoping is to get some ideas from you all. Marie says, I like the bento box search in Galileo for quicker overview. And that certainly does show a lot of what Galileo can provide on one screen. And I don't know if any of my co-presenters have done any bento specific instruction or promotion yet. We're still getting used to it.
I've had a few students, when I've promoted the name of a database, they don't remember how to get there. And so they'll use Bento and just type in the name of the database. And if they remember it correctly, it'll come up. So that it has been useful in that respect.
That I could see how that could be very useful, because you know, we've read a lot of research about how people will put the right search in the wrong search box a lot of times, and they don't know what that particular, they think every box is a everything box, and bento box kind of goes closer to that idea.
Yeah, that's been helpful for students who are trying to find historic newspapers, but they can't remember the names of the databases. So they just type in newspapers and look at the database results.
Or they'll put it in the UNG site search.
Yes.
I do like to explain that Galileo is available in the public library, so they will continue to have access after they graduate. Yes, that's a good thing to pass on, because especially if they're already coming to college being somewhat familiar with Galileo through their K through 12, to know that they have similar but different access through the same, you know, portal as Galileo.
I think that also helps emphasize like the paid nature of these Galileo resources too, where it's not something that you can just get through Google. It's something that you're kind of lucky to have access to.
Yeah, every once in a while I like to throw out like a number, like $1 million, like this costs $1 million, and you are cut off when you graduate. Yeah, not everyone's lucky enough to have their own Galileo. And lastly, do you all have some ways, some ideas? I basically already asked this, but how we can promote and teach Galileo resources, and you know, especially to students at our regional campuses that don't have that convenient access to huge physical collection, or you know, half a dozen librarians that are going to be there anytime they walk in, and how we can promote and teach either virtually or in person. There was a comment earlier about signs. You know, signs just seems like we just keep pushing that boulder up the hill, but you know, it is low effort, low investment to slap a sign up on the wall, but we have limited returns on that sometimes. Newsletter emails.
That's awesome. So are those directed to students mostly? Oh, that's really cool. Maybe might steal that idea.
Yeah, I really like that idea. We don't have a liaison program, but we do have our collection areas. And so each librarian has their 1, 2, 3 departments that we each push out information specific, that's relevant to their particular department. So there's not the consistency or single voice of something like a newsletter, but that's an interesting idea. I like that. I think we have about 5 minutes left.
Oh, nice. 1 database per month and send it to the listserv for the faculty and students. That's really cool.
And I could see how that could be useful, in addition to like what we do, where we have the slider on the website and we have social media, but to condense a lot of that stuff into one single newsletter.
Mhm.
Any other comments or questions? Are people able to unmute?
Oh, you can create quizzes and stories. Oh, interesting. That's really cool that there's a quiz sticker that you can add.
Josina says, I did do a cupcake and cookbook promotion for our instructors, allowed me to show other types of ebooks that we have. Yeah, I was mentioning the other day about how sometimes I'll tell the student, like, there's all kinds of stuff. It's not all boring school stuff and scholarly things. I tell them, when I need to buy a new vacuum cleaner, I go to Galileo and I get consumer reports, and I use that. I don't really use that for work. I use that for my own personal business, and you are free to do that. If anybody took a look at our DVD collection, they would realize that we have all kinds of movies. You could write a scholarly paper on aliens, but you can also just check it out and watch it for fun. But that's a good avenue to promote resources. Be like, there's some fun stuff in here too. What else you got? Who's got a comment or a question? We are definitely always looking to improve our approaches on a micro or macro scale. Especially if anybody has ideas on how to get people to attend workshops on a commuter campus. New student orientations. We've just been planning the summer ones. We have groups come in. The process has been changing for orientation, but they will actually come into the library and we call it tech talk, where we kind of outline computers, printers, scanners, all the resources that we have like physically in the building, and then a mindset matters, where we talk more about services, research consultations, walk-in reference assistance. So it's basically like they have a crazy orientation schedule, full day. So we only really get like a few minutes. So we really just try to hit the high points. And that's difficult for a person like me that wants to talk about the context of Galileo in a 1 hour class. But that's where we really just try to put on our song and dance, really.
Yeah, and I think since we only have a few moments, generally our goal is to just not look scary, so that they'll come back and talk to us later, and we can maybe give them more info then.
Yes, because most of us do it for the campus community that we're at. So the coming students will see me or Teresa, Blue Ridge will see Barbara, Oconee will see Stephen. And so they'll see our faces, hopefully, and be good with us.
That's the benefit of a regional campus. Since we are smaller, people generally recognize each other. And I hope that makes us more approachable.
Yeah, it's not all bad things being in a smaller campus for sure.
Oh, and Josina is saying the atrium is a place where I have put passive programs, drive-by pickup of flyers and other information. Students don't stay, but they're, but that's great. You're putting something into their hands that they could refer back to later that has like all the information that they'll need.
Yeah, we have a couple of different kinds of flyers that are attached to my cabinets in the atrium. So
I feel like the passive program is sometimes what works best with this population of commuter campuses. Just give them the info in a condensed format and let them do with it what they will in their own time. Treats are good.
I like the idea of a treat. Could do that.
I think we may have run over our time. Am I right on that?
I believe so.
Yes. If you have stuck it out this long, thank you. Well, it's
Thanks,
been lovely
Amanda.
to talk to you guys.
Yes,
Thank you for those of you who shared your insights too.
Oh, last slide with our contact.
Oh, haha. Yes, that's us.
And we will have the recording and the PowerPoint up on the archive.
Yes, email us if you have any questions or suggestions or just want to say hi.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of GUGM.